I want to welcome everyone to the show. I'm your host, Jody Taves of Explora Creative, and I'm here with Kathryn Wytsma-Fisher of Wytsma Health and Movement. And today we're going to be talking about running a mobile exercise physiology practice. So I'm very excited about this. I'm excited to hear what Kathryn's going to share about her business journey. And so, Kathryn, for those people in the audience that don't know who you are, can you just kind of give us a quick introduction in terms of like, who are you, what do you do, and what exercise physiology?
Yeah. So I'm Kathryn. It's nice to meet everybody. And I have been a clinical exercise physiologist for almost 20 years. So really almost my entire career. I started my interest in clinical work early in undergrad and just kind of followed that passion through into getting my master's and now into the working field. I've worked in a lot of different fields and a lot of different positions, but have recently transitioned into the kind of entrepreneur space and running my own practice. And that allows me to do what I love all day, every day, which is great.
Awesome. How long would you say you call yourself an entrepreneur? I'm going to use bunny ears because
Here's
it's like
bunny
it might
ears.
have started a
Yeah.
long time ago, but when did you officially own that term?
Yeah. So I started very part-time in like 2021 when I was just picking up the odd client after my full day of work. I would, fit in the odd client here or there.
Yep.
But I really would say I transitioned into full-time doing this in January 2024. So I've only been doing it just over a year.
Mhm.
Really as a full-time kind of focused position for that. And leading the few months leading up to that, I was still transitioning out of more of a full-time traditional job. But as of January 2024 is really when I started.
Yeah. What is a traditional job in exercise physiology out of curiosity?
Yeah, well, it's more like you can work for a clinic or you can work as a multidisciplinary team. I was working more on the research side of things at the University of Calgary and helping with some research projects as the clinical exercise physiologist on the team. So it was more of a, go to the office, work from 8:30 to 4:30, drive home, and you only work on those hours type of idea
Mm,
from in my case, it was Tuesday to Friday were my days that I was working. So that's more of what I would call a traditional job, again, using the bunny ears type of
yeah.
thing. But I left that kind of regular salary cushion, yeah, just over a year ago.
And so what sparked that? Like, it's a big leap to go out of those kind of those salaried positions into running something on your own.
Yeah, it's a big
Why?
leap. For me, I needed more flexibility. I have a young son and he manages a few different health concerns. And so for
Mm,
me, and my family, I needed the flexibility where I could change my schedule kind of on the day of if I needed to. And entrepreneurship allowed me to do that. And also, I've never really found a position that's like really fit what I like to do. So I have a hard time sticking to like a traditional schedule. I like the idea of being able to fit an appointment in here for medical reasons or being able to like do a workout at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon because that's when I feel like it. And I'm an early morning person. So for me, getting up and starting my emails and work at 5 o'clock in the morning is normal for me. But then I like to have my day wrapped up by, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where maybe I'll answer a few emails in the evening or do stuff, but the main part of my day is done by 3 or 4. And there's no positions that allow you to work from 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. So having the flexibility to be able to do that, like I said, was important to my family, but also important to me as an employee to do that. And I joke in that I'm a little bit older and I didn't like working for people anymore. Where I didn't like having to constantly have someone micromanaging every aspect of my day and reporting everything that I'm doing.
mhm.
So having being my own boss is great, and there's pluses and minuses, of course, that go along with that, as any entrepreneur knows. But I would say those are kind of my big main reasons that I did
Yeah.
make the leap with the
Yeah.
support of my amazing husband. Like none of this would have been possible unless it was a team decision. So
Mm. It's so valuable to have a supportive partner. I don't even know if
Yeah.
they know what they're getting themselves into when they
I
say
don't think
yes
he
to
really
those.
does. I still don't think that he really understands that he is such an outlet and a support for me.
Yeah.
And I tell him that regularly. And whether he likes that job or not, I'm not sure if he likes being my big cheerleader, but I wouldn't be able to be where I am without Aaron. So a big thank you to him.
Oh, that's awesome. You feel like you have a work-life balance?
I would say in the months right now, like January to April right now, I'm also teaching at both universities in Calgary. So I
Oh,
have little work-life balance right now.
hmm.
I try not to do that because it's a big commitment to be, and I didn't anticipate that I would be teaching at both campuses. Um, but because of that, the pleasant surprise of a lot of business picking up in the new year, I am quite busy right now. So I would say my balance is not great. But that's something that I'm working on and trying to evaluate to move forward and have more success because I'm very aware of where my limits are and what I need in order to function and do really well. But the nice thing is, for example, this week is reading week, and I made the decision that I was taking tomorrow and Friday off. And because I'm not teaching, I could just cancel my clients and tell them I'm taking, February 20th and 21st off, which doesn't normally align with any holidays, and just not work. And so I have the flexibility to be able to do that. I don't have to check in and, have it approved 6 or 9 months in advance. I can just decide a few weeks ago that there's a gap in my schedule and I'm going to take advantage of that. So because of that, I can rein in the work-life balance a little bit better.
Because you do have that opportunity to at
Yeah,
least like schedule or reschedule or like cancel or reschedule things
exactly.
and you
Yeah,
don't have to plan so far in advance. That's
exactly.
kind of where the balance, where you feel like
Yeah.
the balance comes from.
Yeah, and I think also recognizing what where my strengths in the day are allows me to have good work-life balance. So for me, knowing that I function really well in the morning and can get up at 5 and grab a cup of tea and sit down and do work and get a good couple hours of work done early, and that I'm not as productive in the evenings. So having that as a work-life balance allows Aaron and I to plan that accordingly, where I can be up earlier with Jacob and juggle both parenting and working in the mornings and be able to do that. And then that allows me my evenings to be able to be more present with my family.
Were you aware of what schedule worked best for you before you went out on your own, or do you feel like that's something you learned afterward?
No, that's a great question. I've always known that. I've always been a morning person. And I think I tried to force that schedule in my traditional positions where I'm like, I've already been up since, because I would be working at the hospital and I would work from home before working from home was a real thing. And I would do emails and stuff and then like try and give myself credit for that, like later in the day to argue why I should be able to leave the office at 2 o'clock. That always didn't go over the best as I was flexing my hours probably more than I was allowed to.
Yeah.
But I've always recognized that I work better earlier in the morning and the earlier part of the day, and that I tailor off in the evening. I've just kind of been like that in my adult years. As I would say, mostly after my master's degree, I just recognized that that was the best. I was a student who was at the office on campus by 7 o'clock in the morning, hitting the work school day right away, and then would wrap up and be done by, early evening.
Mhm. Oh, but that's such a valuable piece of information to know about yourself
Yeah,
when you
I mean,
do get to make your own schedule.
it's taken some reflection. And the one thing one of my good friends who's also an entrepreneur would remind me is that to allow myself permission to work those hours,
Mm.
to be like, it's okay for you to get up and work at 5 o'clock in the morning and then be done by 3 because you've already put in 8 hours before
Yeah.
most people have, really put a chunk into their day. And it's okay to do that because you have the flexibility to be able to do that. So sometimes I have to remind myself and give myself permission that
Hmm.
I'm able to do that.
Yeah. So how do you find balancing like being a professional and then also being an entrepreneur? Because I find that like in that like allied healthcare profession is that like we spend so much time working on our craft, I
Yeah,
guess, and our skills, and then you add on this piece of entrepreneurship. So how do you balance that piece in your business?
that's a really tricky part for me because by nature, I struggle with the business part. I
Mhm.
fully know that about myself. That's why I have a business coach. Dan is amazing. Shout out to Dan.
Yeah.
And he has really helped me to develop that business skill piece that I didn't have before.
Mhm.
Because when I first started with this, it was like, well, I'll just be the practitioner and be the clinician and do what I'm good at. I'll be a good clinician and the business stuff will just figure itself out. And now that I've been doing this for a while, I now realize how important that business piece is to make it sustainable. It's not just going to like keep itself going on its own. So I have to juggle being a good clinician and serving my clients at the same time, being a good business owner and serving my business. And some days, some hours, some weeks go better than others, and other times I really struggle with that. But it's important for me that I'm constantly learning how to do better wearing that business hat than being a clinician because that's what I truly know and have done for my whole career. So
Mhm. When did you, so you mentioned having a business coach, and
yeah,
I've actually spoken with Dan Tatton. Is that how you say his
yeah,
name?
Dan Tatton, yeah,
Dan Tatton. Yeah, he was
and
awesome.
he worked with us when we you did my website. He
Yeah.
made some great
Yeah.
appearances to be able to help with that.
Yeah, he was really valuable. So did you start working with Dan before you launched your company, or
Oh,
like
it's a great
right
question.
when you started, like, after the launch?
Yeah, so I started with Dan in a couple months, 3 to 4 months before I made the full-time transition. So when I first started part-time, I strictly did it on my own. And then as I was starting to consider making the transition into doing my own thing full-time, we connected on LinkedIn and I was recognizing that I needed help, but I didn't know who to ask and what I was looking for. And when I connected with Dan, I really found someone to guide that entrepreneurship. And it was a good investment for me to realize that if I was going to do it, I needed to invest in myself to make myself successful. And I wanted to do that from the beginning and get started on the right foot as opposed to floundering for too long and then having to pick up the pieces afterwards. So I've been really fortunate to have time with Dan. Pretty consistently for the last the entire time I've been full time and then a little bit before that to help with the transition piece and really hit the ground as well as I could starting that off. So, and he's a great supporter.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I feel like I had a similar experience with business coaches as well, where
Yeah.
I've had a few different ones, but I quickly realized that I didn't know what I was doing from a business standpoint. Like the technical skills are there, but
Yeah.
the business skills aren't there. And so I was like, oh, well, that worked for mountain biking. It worked when I was working in the knee clinic when I was learning how to be a knee specialist.
Yeah.
I was just like, I progressed so much faster when I had that coaching and mentorship. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like for you,
Exactly.
the same thing. You're like, oh, I sought out that mentorship for myself or that
Yeah.
coaching for myself. Yeah.
And I always like to think of myself as from a clinician, being a mentor to up and coming
Oh,
exercise
of course.
physiologists and clinical specialists. I
Mhm.
really enjoy that role, but also knowing that I need that guidance myself. And especially from a business perspective, having not done any sort of work in that previously, like I didn't take any business courses in undergrad or grad school. And
What?
I know, right? Scary. And then, and I had, dabbled with another person and it wasn't going the way I thought it was going to
Mm.
go. So connecting with Dan was a real asset for me.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for someone looking for a business coach? Is like, or were there any specific questions that you asked or things that you would look for in a business coach that way?
From a business coaching perspective, I really think you need to find someone who's going to listen to what you say and understand your struggles and not just try and fix everything. Because Dan's always made himself like a team member and a supportive someone that I can reach out to and ask questions. And he's never made me feel, dumb or stupid for asking questions that I'm like, I truly have no idea what I'm doing. So he's always been there to encourage and support me and even just be a sounding board. Or I can send him a text and be like, Dan, I'm having an awful day. I want to quit. And he's like, yeah, I've been there. I get it. Let's talk through this. What do you need? And sometimes that's all I need is just to send him a text and be like, I want to quit. And he's like, great. Well, I hear what you're saying and we'll move through this, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes that's all I need. And other times I need more of the strategy piece to be able to do that. So I really find, I think for when you're working with anybody in any sort of role, as an entrepreneur, you really need someone who's going to be a team member with you. Because as an entrepreneur, it can be really isolating, or can feel really isolating,
Yeah.
where you don't have a team especially as a solopreneur. And I'm moving out of the solopreneur into having other team members working with me, and being still isolated away from, I work from home a lot of the time, or I'm in my car a lot of the time. I'm at clients' homes a lot of the time. So I don't have that other employees to kind of work with. So
Mhm.
having someone who feels like a team member and a guide through this process, I would say is a really valuable skills to be able to look for in someone.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is quite lonely. And even when you do have a really supportive partner, them
I
to do
don't
all the
pretend
things.
to know what's going on with Aaron's work all of the time, and I'm not a coworker with him, so I don't
Mhm.
understand the intricacies of his job. I fully respect as well that Aaron is my husband first, and he's not going to be able to provide business support from like an employee standpoint that I'm
Yeah.
as a coworker.
Tell me a little bit about your business model. So it's
Yeah.
quite unique. Can you tell us like
Oh,
what
thank
is
you.
Weitzman Health and Movement?
So when I first started my practice, my big thing was to bring exercise to people's homes, because for so many years I learned from my clients how difficult it was to go to see a clinician, whether they didn't like going to the gym. I've been a personal trainer at a gym many years ago, and that was always difficult for individuals to do that. A lot of my clients and a lot of people with chronic disease deal with time issues, where they've got a lot of appointments, they need to fit it all in, and going to a clinic or going to see a clinician was just another appointment for them. And for me, I wanted to take apart that barrier. And I liked the idea of teaching people how to be active and healthy in their own home using what they did, because that's important for me. That's important in my health and being able to fit activity into my lifestyle. I do it when I'm at home. And so I wanted to bring that level of teaching and encouragement to my clients. And so that's how I started, was advertising that I would go to people's homes. And that's really the key part of my business right now, although we're branching into a few virtual things. And I've always offered a virtual option for some people who were significantly immunocompromised. We were canceling too much because they would be sick or I would be sick or something. So it made sense to move to a virtual model for them. And I still do offer that for individuals who need it. But primarily, I go to my clients' homes or offices in some cases, and bring exercise to them. And we do it in a space that they're comfortable with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I just feel like you had found a niche, and then not only were you marketing to that niche and speaking to them, is you actually created a service model that solved a problem for them. And
Yeah,
it was something that you had already collected this data before you were an entrepreneur.
yeah,
And we're like, this is the problem, and then you created a business to solve it for them, which is
yeah.
so awesome. Are there any challenges that come along with running a mobile practice?
Oh, there's yes, of
Yeah.
course.
What like
I
give
mean,
me your like top like 1 to 3.
oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the biggest challenge is just logistics. So I can have a client all the way in 45 minutes in the Northwest, and then my next appointment could be all the way in the Southeast, and I have to get from point A to point B, no matter the roads, no matter the conditions, no matter the traffic. I have an appointment. I need to be from place to place, and of course, there's strategy involved in trying to think about how to plan out your day so that you're not driving from one place to another, and can you do that more intelligently, to do that, or strategically, I guess is the best way to say it. So that would be the big thing. Of course, there's always the fact that I can't physically fit as many people into my day because I have to plan for travel time, of course, as well. So either my day becomes quite long because I have to buffer travel time on either side, or I just don't see as many people in a day as potentially if you were in one spot, you could book hours kind of back to back, whereas I have to buffer in travel time.
Yeah.
That on the plus side, though, I get to frequent coffee shops all over the city, which is great. And so I know where every Tim's and every Starbucks is on my routes where I need to go, so I can grab and go if I needed to. So there are pluses as well with
Hmm.
that. So and then of course you're kind of um subject to the space that you're provided. So it would be great for every client to have a fully equipped fitness facility in their house, but that's not realistic, nor is that a requirement. And I am a big believer in working with what they have, and that's part of the education piece. But of course, big dreams, it would be great. And it's not realistic for me to, lug dumbbells and barbells and bands and everything with me. But a challenge is working with potentially sometimes limited equipment or space to be able to work with someone.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so other than daily treats and knowing where the coffee shops are there any other advantages you found with the mobile practice?
Yeah. Well, I will say I'm an introvert by nature, so I like my space and I like my alone time. So the nice thing about driving everywhere, I can put on my favorite music, I can put on a podcast, and it be it like a business podcast, so I could argue that I'm working while I'm driving, or whether I, like I said, I put on the radio and hear the news, and I know what's going on just throughout that. I can put on my favorite music and just like rock out in the car with that, so that's great. And it's also nice with with the mobile piece is I set my own schedule. So if I know that I don't know if I'm in the north and I want to stop by and see my nephew, I just won't book someone at that time. I'm right by my brother's house. I can just pop in and be like, well, I'm in the area and I want to see you guys. I just won't book something afterwards. Or same thing if I want to see my parents, or if
Yeah.
Jacob has a school event and I normally would finish my day, I can just plan to not book that time block for when I need to. So I have the flexibility to be able to do that. And you just have a lot of independence because you can come and go as you need to. You can, set your boundaries in terms of time
Mhm.
and what works for you from a mobile perspective. And the nice thing is, I'm not paying rent or paying overhead at a clinic or a touchdown space. And maybe that's in the future, there would be a hybrid kind of option for that.
Mhm.
But my office is my kitchen table, and I can pack up my computer and go from a clinic meeting to patients and wherever I need to be. Just as long as I have my backpack, I can just kind of grab and go, and a bottle of water, and I'm good for the day. So it allows, that's the nice part, is to be able to I can take work with me and do it kind of anywhere that I need to be.
Yeah, it really does come down to
Yeah.
flexibility, doesn't it? Yeah. So how did you go about getting your first clients?
Yeah, that was tough.
Tough, yeah.
It was word of mouth. So I actually had um, a coworker of mine at the hospital be like, "Oh, it's too bad you don't have a private practice, because I know some of these patients would like to see someone on
Mhm.
their own." And I was like, "Interesting. If I did have a private practice, what would that look like?" So there was some word of mouth with that. I also advertise in the community newsletters, have been really handy, because the population that I work with, which is more so, not exclusively, but I work with a lot of older adults, or
Mm.
um, grandparents and parents who are a little bit older, and they don't necessarily like go on the computer, not necessarily, and they don't check their phone all the time, but they get like the community newsletters in their mail, and they'll read it. And so if I advertise in there, I actually got some of my longest standing clients are people that have found me through the community newsletter, and I followed them around as they've moved, and they still kind of stick with me. So um, a lot of word of mouth, and a lot of, thinking about the population that I work with, what would work for them. And I'm still trying to figure that out. I think sometimes I have grand ideas that this will work and it's a resounding failure. And other times I'm like, oh, that worked really well.
Yeah,
And just building relationships and not being afraid to put myself out there and be like, let me tell you what I do and how I think I can help.
yeah. Can you share a little bit more about like which things have been, huge wins for you on that front, and then which
Yeah.
things have just been like, I thought it was gonna be good and it was just a flop.
Yeah. So I can think of two examples. So the first thing was, I don't like cold calling, but you can cold email, which is slightly more comforting. So when I first started, I like blanket emailed a ton of clinics, like any medical practice clinic that I could think of.
Mm.
I would just email them and tell them about myself. And sometimes I would hear from them and sometimes I didn't. But my best referral partners were some potential either people that heard about me on LinkedIn or got my random email and were like, yeah, I'd like to talk about this further. And then we're open to having that introductory conversation. And once I was able to talk to them and tell them more about it and have that two-way dialogue, that worked really well. So it was really about building relationships. The interesting piece that hasn't worked is like the digital advertising piece that I thought might work really, really well. Because it pops up on your phone, or you go and you look at the newspaper, you get an ad in there, and
Mhm.
it really hasn't been that successful at all. Like it's
Interesting.
been like the community newsletters, so like old school print ads and just word of mouth being like, well, my sister's seeing you and she really likes you, so I also want to see you type of thing. And my daughter would really benefit from this, so can we work out together type of thing. So that
Mhm.
has been really successful. And again, it's that relationship piece where once I can talk to someone, then that has been my biggest success.
Yeah. In your newsletter, like in your physical newsletter, like printed newsletter ads, what is your call to action?
Yeah, it's literally been like, chronic disease or working from home or figuring out how to be active and using wellness to support you. It's been really simple and it's only been like a couple lines.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what the magic phrasing has been because I would
Yeah.
love to tap into that and use it more often. But it's just for whatever reason, people in my community have been able to be like, oh, I got a client last week who was like, I saw your ad in the community newsletter like months ago and I wrote it down. And now I'm reaching out to you like 6 months later.
Oh yeah. And
So
do
yeah,
they reach out? Do they book a call with you, or do they reach out like via email first?
yeah, it's been most people don't book. Again, I have the Calendly
Yeah,
system and the
you
whole
do.
like booking a consult with me. That rarely happens. I get like this random email being like, "Hi, we live in your community and we got your name."
Oh
Or
yeah.
they will pick up the phone and call me.
So they'll either email or they'll actually pick up the phone and call you, but they
Yeah.
won't book online.
They
Again, that
won't
might be
book. No, that
part of your
system, unfortunately,
demographic.
as very helpful as it is, it never is used.
But those are good things to know, right? It's like you don't know until you actually try
Yeah.
those things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I use it with other people, but it's a useless thing to provide to other people for myself to
Yeah.
be like, I have the option, you can do it, but
Yeah.
nobody does it. So, and
No.
actually, it's funny because it's never used. I prefer that it not be used because then I have more control over my schedule as opposed to someone
Right.
just randomly booking in on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock because that's the only time that's free in my calendar.
Hmm.
Maybe I don't feel like driving across the city to do that. But if
Yep.
they had asked me that, I would have said that. However, if it's just available in my calendar, then it just gets booked. So
Yeah.
there's
What about
danger.
what about your cold emails? What was kind of like not necessarily the phrasing, but like were you encouraging those clinics that you were emailing to like call you, email you? How did you kind of guide them to the next step of even having that discussion? Because I feel like that is something
Yeah,
that's really helpful.
I think I just explained who I was and how I could potentially help, and if they'd be open to having a conversation. So like, can I set up a phone call? A lot of the time I offered to come to their clinic. Like, can I set up a meeting with you?
Oh
And
yeah.
I will come to you. You tell me when it works, I will be there and I'll make myself available. And that actually worked really well because they'd be like, well, I'm available, I don't know, Wednesday at 12. And I'll be like, great, like I'll make myself available to do that. So I think really trying to take the work out of it for them and make it an easy decision process to be
Hmm.
like, I can help you and this is how. Let me take away all those barriers for you and make myself available for that. And I think I was hoping, and I don't know if this is the case, but I think by showing them my willingness to be flexible and work with them would also demonstrate that I'd be willing to do that for their patients as well.
Yeah, you're like, this is how I consistently show up for my
Yeah.
referral partners and your patients as well. It's
Yeah.
like a character kind of reference.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
hope that they would pull that at least from that
Hmm.
opportunity. So
Yeah. So how do you build those relationships with the referral partners? So you reach out, they say yes. Now you have this referral partners. How are you building the relationships with like doctors, allied health professionals?
yeah, I think it's consistent communication. So keeping them up to date about like when my prices change or new programs that I have offerings or like what I'm up to, wishing
Mhm.
them a happy new year, just like regularly staying in contact with them and keeping
Mhm.
them sort of, or keeping me at least front of mind for
Mhm.
them as well. And then asking and finding ways that I can help support their patients and not from like a cost perspective. Just being like, can I write a newsletter for you guys? Can I come and do a speaker series for your other clinicians so that they know about different options with that? Um, can I, put business cards out at the front desk so that kind of if your patients have questions, can I do any of that? So it's really just been different ways of trying to stay in touch with them and finding out what their needs are for their patients and how I can fill that need.
Mhm. Do you ask any specific questions about the needs of their patients, or how do you figure that out?
I think it's a lot of the dialogue back and forth and a lot of the meetings is figuring out and asking like where are the gaps? What would help your patients to in my case, like be more physically active, or where are they struggling, or what questions do they have that you're not able to answer? And a lot of it comes down to time, where they're like, I would love to talk with them about, getting more activity in the day, but I don't have time. So
Mhm.
can I send them to you to be able to have those discussions? Or are you able to answer those things? Or if we wanted to provide this support for our patients, could you be a resource that we could provide? And things like that. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is not coming in with a preconceived plan as like how you're going to fit in, because I have a different relationship with almost every different referral partner that I have. It looks
Oh, wow.
different for everybody depending on the needs of their clinic.
Wow. How did you figure out how to do that? Was that something that you got through coaching, through life experience?
Some of it was through Dan,
Mhm.
who made the suggestion of like, you might want to try this. And I was like, I've got nothing to lose. And then persistence, like, and again, this was with Dan's support, was just being like, if you don't hear from a few of them, like, keep trying. Cause I don't think it was the first clinic that I emailed that got back to me. I think it was probably if I emailed 40 clinics and maybe two of them got back to me type of thing. So,
Oh, yeah.
it's being persistent and continuing to like nudge and touch um, and be available to keep trying.
Yeah. How did you manage? I mean, that's a lot of rejection, just based
Yeah,
on like, it's scary to put yourself
it's
out there and be like,
totally.
I'm going to send 40 emails and I'm only going to hear back from two. How
Yeah.
did you manage that?
I think because I had nothing to lose, I had to keep trying. Like if I was gonna make this work, I had to find a way to make it work. And I think once one was really successful, then I was like, okay, this can actually work, and you could see how the benefits of doing that could
Mhm.
really do that. And I think when I engaged with someone who was like, this is really interesting and you do really good work and I'm really interested to hear more, it's very validating to be able to be like, okay, well, I do know what I'm doing, and I do have a valuable service, and maybe more people would be interested in that.
Oh, yeah. But like, be persistent. And then there's also that piece of like, as soon as you get like one good kind of bite on that line,
Yeah,
then all of a sudden you have a good conversation and you're like, oh, this is a good fit. And then
yeah, exactly.
it feels like it's validating, and then I think it's encouraging to keep reaching out to people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good for you. It takes so much courage. That's awesome.
Yeah, and like I said, some days you feel really courageous and other days you feel very defeated. So
Very much like this.
yeah, very much like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a roller coaster. So in terms of like, is there anything that you wish you would have done sooner in your business? If
Well,
there's
that's a
like one
really
thing.
I don't I wouldn't say so. Like, I don't think there's one thing that I'm like, oh, I wish that I had figured that out. I mean, you could be naive and be like, I wish I had my clinic partners in place, like right from the beginning, and that would have been, but that just doesn't happen. Like, that's not something that I could control. So, yes, I would love to have the number of referrals that I get now last year. That would have been great. That's not realistic because the relationship had to build and things had to be figured out and that sort of thing. Um, but I think giving myself permission to be okay with a flexible schedule has, I would say, is I wish I had recognized that earlier, and the importance of building self-care time into my day
Oh,
and wherever it fits, be it um in the morning, in the evening, on my weekends, because it's really easy to just be working all the time. And I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm still, feeling miserably at it, but I think,
That's just part of the
yeah,
process.
exactly. I think
Yeah.
recognizing how important it is really good. And the other thing I would say, and I was always kind of doing this, but I discovered podcasts a lot later than a lot of other people. And I figured out the ebook thing, which was great for driving because Dan used to live in Canmore. So I would drive out for the occasional meeting with Dan and I'd get a good chunk of a book done in an hour and a half drive.
Mhm.
But on my shorter, half hour, 45 minutes between clients, you can get a good podcast stuff in there. So it's been great listening to different entrepreneur, business, life, different podcasts. Um, that allows your brain to still be thinking and pondering stuff while I'm commuting and while I'm doing things. So I find that I'm still productively using my day because it allows me to percolate on things about work
Mhm.
without having to be sitting down in front of a computer and be like, well, now I'm going to focus and think. So I kind of wish I had realized that sooner because that has been really eye-opening for me as to how beneficial that has been.
Yeah. Oh man, what a good lesson. Um, so we're really kind of coming to the end of our time here together, and I'm sure we could keep talking about. I have
Of
more
course, yeah,
questions
we
for
could
you,
talk.
but I can't ask you all the questions.
That's fair.
So, if listeners could take only one thing away from this conversation, what do you hope it is?
I hope that people would learn and recognize how important it is to be true to what's important to you as an individual. And I say that in the idea that being an entrepreneur and running my own practice has allowed me to build a job. It's not really a job, but a job that has what I like doing and what's important to me naturally built in, but given me the flexibility and things that I need as well. And
Mhm.
it's taken me however many years of working, 20 plus years of working to realize how important that is to me and how much better I function when I'm in that environment. And so, not to discredit yourself about how important it is to think about what's important to you and what you need from a work position. Not saying entrepreneurship is the answer, but in whatever position you're in, to make sure you're getting what's important to you out of it so that you are functioning your best and doing your best work.
Oh yeah. So like really find like again, not that entrepreneurship is the only answer because it's
No,
not, but it's that like finding a position, finding whether it's a career, the actual position itself,
yeah,
choosing to build a business for yourself that's
yeah,
actually aligned with like how you work with what you value
yeah.
and
And what's
what's
important to you and
important to
where your
you.
strengths are. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for being our guest today. This was so awesome. We're gonna have some links in the show notes just so where people can find you online and how they can connect if they want to learn more information.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I just want to thank all the listeners for tuning into the show today and just wishing everyone a lovely day.